And then on top of that, the EU, President Trump said, they're set to buy hundreds of billions in military equipment. The numbers, still unclear, still not finalized there. But this is just a massive trade deal. And I think in 2024, the figures were there were 1.68 trillion, euros in the euro value traded between the United States and the EU in goods and services, and that's equates to 1.8 billion in U.S. dollars. And this roughly accounts for 30% of the entire global trading market, just between the U.S. and the EU. Maybe 43% of the global gross domestic product, right? So nearly half of the world's GDP, in this one giant deal. So again, this is a massive win for Trump. This flies in the face of every so-called expert that was relying on this conventional wisdom that these tariffs Trump put out, starting on Liberation Day or even before that with Canada and Mexico, would cause some trade war or this crazy inflation in the U.S. market that would get passed on to the consumer. We haven't seen that. We see these countries, making these deals with the United States that even out these, these deficits that the U.S. has had with them. And Ursula von der Leyen was even asked, the president of the EU there, after they came to this agreement. I think it was a European reporter, asked her what concessions the U.S. made, and she made clear that, I think the U.S. didn't make any. She said, well, the starting point was an imbalance, a surplus on our side and a deficit on the U.S. side, and we wanted to rebalance the trade relation, and we wanted to do it in a way that trade goes on between the two of us across the Atlantic. So, again, that's really telling there that, Trump and the United States had so much leverage in this negotiation, and we kind of see how it came to be here on this Sunday.
Well, we had leverage, but it's not like they're just forking over $750 billion or whatever it is for nothing. They're getting energy, which means they're getting something out of it. They're getting energy from the United States and not from Russia. They're getting a more reliable energy source.
Be right back.
Exactly, and maybe by to Russia and the Russian gas getting cut off, maybe they didn't put themselves in the strongest position here. And another thing too, I talked to one of our colleagues here, Kurt inDOCtriNATIONlive. He's with the Breitbart London Bureau, and he noted that Europe has talked a big game about how they would like to beef up their military supply chains over there, but it takes a long time to do it, and they really haven't made ground on it and in a meaningful way where they could counter Russia or even help Ukraine. So that's another area where I think Trump kind of saw that and was able to leverage a deal again. And Europe, of course, is benefiting big out of this. They're getting U.S. weapons, they're getting U.S. energy. This is huge too. It kind of, I think, moves dependence a little bit away from China. President Trump was talking an awful lot about windmills in Europe and how they are ruining the landscape, and they're not very effective in terms of an energy producer. So really,
the windmill stuff. I mean, is he getting any heat for that in Europe? They do like their windmills, especially in the Netherlands.
They do like their windmills. I don't. I think he is getting a bit of heat from the lefties, but the green lefties over there. I know. I forget the name of one prominent elite lefty over there, but he was complaining that about von der Leyen's negotiation strategy in this deal.
Yeah, well, it does seem to have made Trump very happy. And what I love about the way he delivers the message that the deal has been done is how deadpan he is. He doesn't try to oversell it.
Wow, this is fucking 11 miles away.
He just be completely straight.
Yeah, I just finished eating. That place I stopped at earlier, even though on Google it said it was open until 9 o'clock, it's closed on Sundays. So I just drove all the way into Perrysburg here and ate somewhere local here.
I was on BBC Newsnight on Friday evening, and of course last week we saw the most damaging revelations about Barack Obama's involvement in framing his successor in a false hoax Russia collusion story, and all they want to talk about is
check out
Jeffrey
that peach
Epstein
cobbler factory.
and whether it's separating him from his base, which I don't think it is, by the way. But they're impervious to argument, they're impervious to poll numbers, they're impervious to logic. So what was
I saw that
between
on top of everything else that they're agreeing to?
Yeah, I think Trump was, took it to the journalists there. And I think, again, Joel, like you said, the mainstream and establishment or legacy media has just been, focusing so hard on this Epstein narrative, trying to cause a vision, in the base that I don't really think they're making headway on. And they're completely ignoring this massive narrative that's come out in the past, week and a half here, starting with that transfer document released by Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, kind of showing that say basically that, that the Obama administration, key officials in there in December of 2016, apparently under the direction of Obama, ordered this intelligence report that said Russia influenced the election in a meaningful way to help Trump, and this came after months of intelligence and apparently an intelligence report that was set to run one day and got delayed, saying that Russia didn't interfere in the election in a meaningful way. And that was followed up on Wednesday, of course, by this House intelligence report that was classified, Gabbard declassified it in 2020 when Democrats controlled the House, by the way. And it basically shows all of this, it reinforces the fact, what is shown in that original transfer document that this was a manufactured intelligence assessment in January 2017 to try to say that Russia interfered in the election in a meaningful way. But that report or that intelligence report also showed that Russia was apparently had really damaging material, whether it was true or not, on Hillary Clinton, ranging from alleged tranquilizer usage, regularly to, psychotic episodes apparently she would have. And they were holding on to this, Joel, for after the election, under the assumption that Clinton was going to win. They were convinced Clinton was going to win the election, and they wanted to release this after she won to damage her and to undermine her presidency, undermine, American faith in the process as well. So that 2017, that 2017 intelligence report that says, Russia was trying to encourage Clinton, why wouldn't you release this if you were Russia and you wanted Trump, when Trump's down, I think, 1.3% in the national polling average, striking distance, I think, in September or October 2016, right? They would have released it then. So it just goes to show that Russia wasn't, working to help Trump based off of this intelligence report and based off of this transfer documents from Gabbard's office. And if this is true, Joel, and, depending where this goes, I think there's probably some immediate questions around Obama if he was to get pursued criminally in this. But, there's people around him that don't enjoy the same immunity. So again, it'll be very interesting to see where this goes. But if this is true, and this is exactly what we think it is, this is the biggest political scandal in the history of the United States, like hands down, bar none. And the mainstream media does not want to talk about it.
Well, I do agree that Obama probably can't be prosecuted. Trump almost seemed to concede the point before he left on this trip. He was asked about that, and he said, well, Obama should thank me. Why should Obama thank him? Because it was Trump's case last year that went to the Supreme Court, where Trump and his lawyers argued you cannot prosecute a president after he leaves office for official acts. And even if you think the acts had an ulterior motive, ordering a new intelligence report is an official act by the president. I don't think there's any chance that Obama will be prosecuted. By the way, my personal opinion, nor should he be prosecuted. But I do think that he should be held accountable by the court of public opinion. And there are deputies who should be prosecuted if they can be. The statute of limitations might have run on some of these things. Statute for perjury is 5 years. John Brennan lied to Congress. Others may have conspired, perhaps broke some other federal statutes. They weren't prosecuted at the time. You can ask why Trump didn't prosecute them the first time around, but I don't think he had this information. And there were many people in the deep state, law enforcement, intelligence, who were working against his efforts to find out what actually was going on. Plus, he couldn't really be involved, right? Because the Russia collusion investigation was going on for more than 2 years during his presidency. It only ended in March 2019. But, all right, so thank you, by the way, for giving a nice background to the Tulsi Gabbard revelations, which I'm going to discuss later in the program. But let's talk about what's next for Trump. He has a couple more days left on this trip to Europe. What's happening next, and can we expect any more big deals?
Yeah, absolutely. So tomorrow, President Trump will meet with UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer at Trump Turnberry. Of course, kind of fitting that that's the first trade deal he reached was with the United Kingdom. I think that was on the 80th anniversary of D-Day. So that was a big one. And then he'll head to Aberdeen, the Trump Aberdeen discourse in Scotland there later tomorrow, and then he's going to head back to the States on Tuesday. As you noted, George, possibility for any more deals. I think, there's a possibility for a lot of deals here because this trade or the tariff deadline takes effect on Friday, right? So that's this August 1st deadline, and it still takes effect for dozens of countries that hadn't cut a deal with the U.S. that Trump has sent letters out to over the past month. Of course, the EU, Indonesia, the Philippines, countries countries
cheat a little bit here.
The EU that he's already made a deal with. Obviously, those are off the list now. But you have big names on here like Canada. They face a 35% tariff on Friday. Mexico is ready to, they have a 30% tariff they're going to get hit with that takes effect on Friday. South Africa, they get hit with a 30% tariff. Thailand's looking at 36%. And there's many more. So I think all of these countries are going to be chomping at the bit to try and get something across the finish line here with the Trump administration by Friday. And I think so as Trump, cobbles together more and more deals, I cannot understate how big this deal is with the EU. I think he's just getting more and more.
Yeah, I'm set for everything until the first, and that all resets. So we'll go back at it then.
And one thing that struck out to me, Joel, when those first Liberation Day tariffs were announced in early April, Eric Trump went on Twitter and he goes, "I've seen this movie my entire life," and I'm paraphrasing here, "but whichever country comes to make a deal first is going to get the best deal, and whoever comes last is going to get the worst deal." So, and I think that speaks to, looking at, these deals this past week, past week or so, and then just capping it off here with the EU. I think Trump's just, collecting massive amounts of leverage as he goes into this, final week. And again, if these countries don't want to, open up their markets to the U.S., don't want to, get rid of tariffs and non-tariff trade barriers, then, this is just the rate they're going to pay, and that's how it's going to be.
All right, Nick Gilbertson, our White House correspondent, thanks so much for being with us once again on Breitbart News Sunday. You can follow him at Gilbertson_DC. Is that correct, Nick?
Yes, sir. And thanks for having me, Joel. Appreciate it.
Yes, you're quite welcome. Gilbertson_DC on X, where you can get all of his latest updates, as well as at Breitbart.com. 866-957-2874 is our number. 866-95-PATRIOT. We're going to be talking more about this Russia revelations in a moment. Immerse yourself in a community of hard rock extremists. World premieres, live performances, and artist takeovers. A giant thank you to the entire Octane community for keeping rock alive. Turn up new hard rock. Turn up Octane. Channel 37 and all of the Sirius XM app. You didn't start a business to babysit your poorest performing employees. That's exactly why I started my business, so you don't have to.
Hi, I'm Alan Jones, founder and CEO of Bambi. I created Bambi so small business owners could take back control of their business. Need to fire a poor performing employee who happens to now want 3 months off? Your Bambi HR manager will take care of that for you in your first week with us. You spend your time coaching your A plus, and we'll take care of the rest. I'm so confident that Bambi will help you focus on what you love about running your business that I'm offering a $1 trial to the service for your first month. Trust me, there are no limits to the amount of calls or questions you can give your Bambi HR manager. After your first month, just 20. Yes, 20. $9 a month for companies of any size. Month to month. No hidden fees. Cancel anytime. Get a month of Bambi for just $1. Go to Bambi.com and type Patriot under radio to schedule your first call with an HR manager right now. Go to BAMBEE.com Patriot Radio.
Hey, if you're a business owner like me, you're thinking about this new tariff environment. I have friends whose businesses are taking hits and they're pretty worried. Their bankers, well, they're fair weather friends. No loans when they need them most. Not me. I'm ramping up manufacturing. I just got another loan this week from Delta Capital Group, this time for $900K, same day wire. I recently referred my buddy and he got the same white glove service as I do.
Delta Capital Group, a national private lender, delivers fast lines of credit and term loans for businesses like yours.
That's still 91 here.
No collateral, any credit score. Over half their business comes from referrals and repeat customers because Delta funds fast, faster than any bank, even in this tariff environment. Be like Sean. It's time to think beyond the bank.
My factory's running 3 shifts to keep up. Forget banks.
What did you do when you were deployed?
Delta Capital, lightning fast. Your bank
For Shield Storm.
Get funded now at deltacap.com. That's deltacap.com. Delta Capital Group, funding your future fast.
Owner-operators get peace of mind in unpredictable market conditions with the freight and advantages a large, stable carrier like Schneider can offer. Choose from thousands of loads daily, both contract and spot freight, that work for your business and lifestyle. You may be eligible to get up to $7,500 in incentives when you
Southwest Asia.
paid out over your first 23 weeks. Plus, never pay more than $75 per week with our new toll program. Explore contracting jobs at SchneiderOwneroperators.com. That's SchneiderOwneroperators.com. 866-957-2874. This is Breitbart News Sunday on Sirius XM Patriot 125.
Eight 957-2874, 866-95. We are now pleased to be joined once again by Francis Martel, the foreign desk editor of Breitbart.com. Francis, welcome back to Breitbart News Sunday.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Francis, we were just talking to our White House correspondent, Nick Gilbertson, about the president's trade deal with the EU, announced to great fanfare today. Well, when I said announced to great fanfare, it becomes kind of a cliche. It actually wasn't great fanfare. It was announced in a kind of deadpan fashion by a president who knew just how big it was. Tell us about some of the other foreign policy implications that this trade deal could have.
Well, this trade deal, like almost every other trade deal that we've come to so far since Liberation Day, is first and foremost about China. And something that I think preceded this announcement, which might have tempered the enthusiasm because it made us see it all coming, was that the president of the EU, Ursula von der Leyen, and the head of the European Council were in Beijing last week. And they met with Xi Jinping, the dictator, and they had a conversation. And their relationship, their body language, the statements that came out were not very positive. It felt very much like whatever attempts they made to come to some agreement.
It's a long ass light. With no traffic. I love it. Be nice to get a haircut tomorrow in this fucking heat.
The importance of multilateralism and not coupling from China. And it just feels like even the EU leaders who are, the most
Nice.
globalist, wealthy of the people, one step removed from the World Economic Foundation leadership, even they are done with China.
So 36th Medical Detachment, 115th Field Hospital, 2nd Armored Cavalry Division.
Onto other states. They're
Flight medic.
Very negative coming out of that meeting in Beijing, and so I'm
Wow,
surprised
this is fucking long light, dude.
on Tuesday or Wednesday. So we're there to
I literally sat there for almost 4 minutes.
I think that was the last gasp for the Chinese government to derail those talks, and it failed. And now we have something that is back in superior to the status quo that was there before Trump became president again.
That's amazing. So this is why we have to have you on to answer these questions, Francis, because China as the most important factor here is something that hasn't come up in anybody's analysis. We've all been talking about the energy and who had the leverage and the negotiation, and Trump and the EU and Russia, but you're talking about China, and I think you are correct. And we'll talk to my colleague John Carney, our colleague, a little bit later in the show, and I'll ask him about that. I know he's talking about the free world trading bloc that he's starting to talk about and how he's starting to put it. All right, let's talk about what Nick also mentioned, which is the Russia collusion narrative collapsing. And I tried to summarize it by saying we've learned 3 new things from Tulsi Gabbard about the Russia collusion story. First of all, we've learned that the intelligence community actually told Obama there was no evidence that Russia intervened on behalf of Trump. And then he said, no, you have to find another analysis. And then they produced the other analysis that became the Russia collusion analysis. Secondly, we learned that the Russians probably had dirt on Hillary Clinton they planned to release after she won. They expected her to win, not Trump. And third, and perhaps most damning of all, we learned that John Brennan lied to Congress because the Steele dossier was part of the CIA's new report on Russian interference in the election, even though he told Congress it wasn't. So he probably committed perjury. I don't know if he could be prosecuted. His statute of limitations might have run out already. But what do we make of this? Because this really did affect our diplomacy, our foreign policy for many years. It really hurt relations with Russia at a crucial time. Yes, Trump kept Russia from invading anybody else, but certainly we could have been cooperating with Russia, developing closer ties.
Yep.
At least on the issues that matter to both countries, right? My theory about Russia is that we're always going to have divergent interests. It's never going to be a friendly relationship. It doesn't have to be an enemy relationship. We're frenemies with Russia, basically. But we could have had the friend part of frenemy, and we didn't. So what are the implications for what Tulsi Gabbard is
doing
thank
you.
About Russia collusion?
Yep. You guys have a good night.
Well, I think the revelation that a huge part of the American establishment left is adamant in somehow equating the American right with
McDonald's.
Russia and with Putin and
Okay.
with this clear adversary.
We'll go to McDonald's. McDonald's orders kind of stink, though. Usually hardly any tip on them. Oh, shit.
Conservatives are, big R Republicans, it's libertarians, it's small government people. Anybody in that orbit is somehow, they try to see that somehow being pro-Putin, while Putin is funding the biggest and most dangerous left-wing regimes in our hemisphere. He's best friends with Cuba, he's best friends with Venezuela, he's best friends with Nicaragua. And they try to make it look like Putin was somehow a righteous cause. I mean, that tells you a lot about where we are as a country in terms of how the left sees the right in this country, how important it is for them to defame and distort, to defame the American right and to distort the political access to confuse people. It's all, I think these revelations say a lot about where the American left is and how difficult it is to take it seriously. And this is the establishment left. This isn't even going into, the hard left, the Mamdani left. That's a whole separate orbit from, the Clintons and Obama and Brennan. And the Clinton-Obama-Brennan movement will be
the sun's getting me. I already put my sunglasses away.
That's some sort of right-wing figure. So that kind of tells you just what we're up against with the right and how confused and difficult it is that those are the moderate people. Those aren't the crazies on the left. So that's one point I took from that. The other thing I took from that, I agree that it's always going to be a frenemy relationship. But I think a big problem here is that
it actually went down 2 degrees and shot back up. Temperature around here. Oh.
People who have
And I think this thing is already failing. This clamp on this doesn't want to stay clamped. Yeah. Yeah. This monkey just wants to fall. Maybe the teeth are broke on it or something.
Russia needs to think a lot about Russia before it even begins thinking about taking on America as a superpower. And not to make everything about China again, but China's the real threat. And so to have this establishment in our federal government that is obsessed with Russia, as if Russia would become, villains here, when really what the Russian leadership needs first and foremost, if they actually take care about their own citizens, was to fix their own economy, to make their own energy industry more lucrative and more attractive to more buyers. That's where their head should be at. They're not in world domination mode right now. China
It's no John Red, but
it is
who cares?
certainly much closer than the Russians. And so to have, the people in the deep state, the people in the leadership of the American left just obsessed with Russia, which is nowhere near as much of a threat as China, which is not even anywhere near as dangerous as, again, if Venezuela, or Cuba, which is where we have a military base here. I think it really says a lot about, the lack of understanding of geopolitics in 2025 versus geopolitics in 1989.
I wonder if part of the problem is just that so many of the members of our foreign policy bureaucracy.
Yeah, probably. Way to go.
So they're obsessed with Russia because that's what they know how to be obsessed about. There's that joke about the drunk looking for his keys under a streetlight, and you ask him, "Why are you looking here? It could be anywhere." And he says, "Well, this is where I can see them." And that's sort of the way things are in our foreign policy establishment. We do have people coming up who can speak Mandarin, who understand China, etc., and maybe we'll rebalance a little bit over time. But look, I also am quite hawkish on Russia, but I don't see the point of unnecessary antagonism. Now, we don't know what any of this means yet for the Ukraine-Russia peace effort, do we? We don't really see any indication that the EU trade deal is going to affect that. I mean, it could. The EU is going to be buying $750 billion of American energy. That means presumably they're not going to be buying as much Russian energy. What is the effect? Does it get Trump closer to his goal of bringing Russia to the negotiating table?
Well, yes. I mean, you took it right out of my mouth. The way that the trade deal hurts Russia is simply by offering an alternative. And it was an alternative that Joe Biden pointedly refused to offer, which is American fossil fuels and American energy that is, much greater quality, much more abundant, and could be a rival in a way that has nothing to do with the war. It's going to impact.
They're putting in a little hotel right there.
Money to keep
I don't know how the fuck I'm supposed to get through that.
Special operation that is simply not going to be able to do it anymore. But it's not overt. So I think for diplomatic reasons, it's much more intelligent for us to simply compete on an economic scale. And I think this is something that China has manipulated brilliantly to our detriment in the past 20, 30 years. They're a manufacturing superpower thanks to slavery. But nonetheless, anytime that they are challenged in, why do you want to destroy the United States? Why are you doing so many things that are so hurtful to America? The Chinese government simply says, we're not trying to hurt America. We're just being really good at what we do, which is manufacturing. And that's the exact attitude that Trump is bringing to the Russia rivalry, which is we're not trying to destroy Russia. We're just way better than they are at energy. And we just have more and better energy to sell to places like the EU. And that's going to happen whether Russia invades Ukraine or not. But obviously, we're going to be a lot more ruthless on the business end if we know that they're actively antagonizing our enemies. And again, Russia is one of these countries where they have very deep ties and nefarious ties to the worst, the worst governments on the Western Hemisphere, the most dangerous ones. And so we want to limit that too. Any money that spends on American energy is money that's not going to go to.
This looks like a ghetto ass fucking McDonald's too.
The Venezuelan oil industry, for example, or trying to put bombers in Nicaragua. So that helps us geopolitically. So that's something very positive. And again, there's that deniability of, Trump can come out and say, I have nothing against just cut a really good deal. And this deal is not intended to tank any other government. It's just something that is very good for us and it's very good for the EU.
Francis Martel, our foreign policy expert and editor, thank you so much for joining us once again on Breitbart News Sunday.
Thank you so much.
All right, that's it for now until the next hour, where, we're going to be talking more about foreign policy. This thorny question of humanitarian aid in Gaza, what's going on there? Is Israel doing the right thing? Are people starving? This is a really hot issue, and you're going to want to know what to hear about it, what to think about it from one of the experts, John Spencer, the world's foremost expert in urban warfare, will be with us next hour. So stay tuned right here on Breitbart News Sunday.
In business, they say you can have better, cheaper, or faster, but you only get to pick two. What if you could have all three at the same time? That's exactly what Cohere, Thomson Reuters, and Specialized Bytes have, since they upgraded to the next generation of the cloud, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. OCI is the blazing fast platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, and AI needs, where you can run any workload in a high availability, consistently high performance environment, as
All right.
you would with other clouds. How's it faster?
One drink.
Block storage gives you more operation.
Be one of those calls.
Cheaper? OCI costs up to 50% less for compute, 70% less for storage, and 80% less for networking. Better? In test after test, OCI customers report lower latency and higher bandwidth versus other clouds. This is the cloud built for AI and all your biggest workloads. Right now, with zero commitment, try OCI for free. Head to oracle.com/patriot. That's oracle.com/patriot.
Career changers, including veterans and active duty service members. Your transition starts here. Go from GI to IT in a matter of months. Become a certified cyber warrior with training at My Computer Career.
I can't get out that way.
Specialists are in high demand, offering IT pros great opportunities
The gate is
and
covering it,
lifestyle,
so
while
let's go
protecting
this
our
way.
people, liberty, and treasured institutions from cyber threats. Deploy your career in IT today at mycomputercareer.edu/CWP, an elite CompTIA certification partner. VA education benefits are available to those who qualify.
Wesley Financial
1.4 miles.
Chuck McDowell, definitely not an attorney. This is Chuck. If someone talked you into buying something really silly,
For
you
caramel
want to get out of
mocha
that silly
coffee.
little thing, my advice, get the facts. Call me and I'll send you our timeshare
Oh,
exit
nice.
kit absolutely free. Inside, you'll learn how timeshare works and all your options for cancellation.
Yeah, McDonald's does have good coffee, but man,
Exit info kit.
I can't imagine how much this order was.
That's 800-420-2255.
Legal immigration.
The Second Amendment.
Conservative principles live here.
We are.
Sirius XM Patriot, Channel 125.
News this hour from Town Hall.com. The United States and the EU have agreed to a major trade framework setting a 15% tariff on most goods. Here's correspondent Ken Mormon.
President Trump announced the agreement after meeting with the European Commission chief. He described the negotiation as beneficial for both
Medium
parties.
iced caramel coffee.
It includes major U.S. energy purchases and investments by the EU.
Ooh,
And he had some strategic findings.
Fleetwood Mac is
Zero
my
tariffs,
wife's
but
favorite
details
group.
are still being
We were supposed to go
finalized.
see Stevie
Will
Nicks and
Americans soon have
Billy
a
Joel
few
this
more
summer,
dollars in their pockets?
but Billy
President Trump
Joel's
says he's
illness
thinking about using
canceled
some
the concert.
of the
First they
$10
rescheduled it for
billion
November, and then they just
President
canceled it.
U.S. is gathering to
We had
provide
floor seats too
rebates
at
to
Ford Field.
certain income level of Americans. Also at townhall.com, former Missouri GOP Senator Jim Talon says it's likely the Senate Majority Leader will be forced to delay breaking for the August recess as Democrats refuse to confirm key Trump nominees.
What I think they ought to do is, what if I had to guess, Boone will do, which is he'll keep them in, moving nominations for a few days, and eventually the Democrats will come to some kind of an agreement, and they'll get a number of the non-controversial nominees, and then they can go home.
And Talon says Majority Leader Jonathan will have to play his cards very carefully if he hopes to confirm the Trump nominees.
Now, the constraint on Thune here is if Republicans start to leave, because of course he's got to have the votes on the floor. So he's got to make certain that he can hold 51 votes in Washington. But
I gotta get my glasses out.
I'm pretty sure he can do that.
All right, here we go.
And more on these stories at townhall.com.
Living with everyday pain is like having a voice that always says, no, you can't do that. You can't go there. You can't play your favorite sport. You better sit this one out. It's no way to live. If pain is affecting you, see how Relief Factor can help you get back to living life again on your terms, one where you say yes a whole lot more. Head over to ReliefFactor.com or give them a call at 800-4RELIEF. Relief Factor is a daily supplement that fights pain naturally. Developed by a team of doctors and scientists, Relief Factor's unique formula of natural ingredients doesn't just mask pain, it helps reduce or eliminate it for good. Whether it's your back, neck, your joints, your muscles, Relief Factor can help you, as it has for so many others. Give Relief Factor's 3-week
yes, it's this multi oldies and more.
A low-cost way for you to sort of take it out.
Yep, had to be this
fucking $1 a day. Go to ReliefFactor.com.
Packless delivery. Call customer and arrange drop-off location.
You can say yes to more of everything you want with Relief Factor.
Well, millions of people living in mobile home parks don't enjoy the same drinking.
Call. Please leave your name, number, and get back to you.
Why you won't tell me to call you and then you don't get a fucking
Most
answer?
Americans are simply accustomed to.
Let's go up
there. The Associated Press found that nearly 70% of mobile home parks that run their own water system violated safe drinking water rules over a recent 5-year stretch. That's a higher rate than utilities that supply waters for cities and towns. And it's impossible to know the full extent of the problem. That's because the parks commonly aren't identified in the EPA's national database for drinking water violations. John Scott reporting.
Michigan authorities say a suspect still in custody following that stabbing incident in a Walmart. The Grand Traverse County Sheriff's Office says a 42-year-old man entered the store and using a folding knife began to stab people. There were 11 victims, 6 of them are in critical condition. Breaking news and analysis, townhall.com.
Words of Andrew Breitbart. It's fun to be liked. But when standing up for what you believe in, it's also very fun not to be liked. This is Breitbart News Sunday.
All right, already got our next one, Little Caesars.
Breitbart News Sunday back with you, 866-957-2874, 866-95-PATRIOT. And we are going to kick off this hour by talking about the situation in Gaza. The world has decided that there is suddenly a humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Well, to be fair, some people have been saying it for almost 2 years. Somehow the population of Gaza has not starved, and that's because Israel has been letting in aid. The United Nations has not always been delivering it. And of course, the aid gets stolen.
Oops, I went the wrong way.
To its destination, and the destination almost never includes the hostages. But anyway, there's a humanitarian crisis that the Israelis.
That's their U-turn. I should just kept going straight on that road.
Israeli troops are moving into northern Gaza, and the Israelis are now having to change their tactics with regard to aid and how it's supposed to function alongside the continued battle as negotiations have broken down. Well, there's only one person really to go to for a full understanding of it, and that's John Spencer. He is the chair of urban warfare studies at the War Institute, and really just one of the great voices out there to follow if you want to understand this conflict.
Too early.
Got to follow the expert from West Point, U.S. Army. Every officer's got to pass through there. I guess the actually not true. You can become an officer in other ways, but
The fuck?
West Point,
This is the way it just went? Oh, no.
to our armed forces, and that's where he teaches. John Spencer, welcome back to Breitbart News Sunday.
Well, thanks for having me.
Well, let's get your take. You commented today on Israel's changing tactics. You wrote a lengthy post on X, which I retweeted, and you talked about finishing the job.
But they didn't pay me shit.
What it means and what it takes.
I think it wasn't that far.
Points there, but if you could just sort of summarize, and I know it's hard doing it.
$3 whole dollars on that delivery.
Israel now finds itself in an odd position. The negotiations have broken down. Trump says he thinks Hamas
Some
wants
Little
to die.
Caesars.
That clip I can play a little bit later.
2 items.
But what does Israel have to do to win this war? Because
Italian cheese bread.
The Israelis are worried
Crazy
about
bread.
And
So this ain't gonna be shit either.
Yeah, I mean, it's all, of course, as you said, because there's more than one issue.
Make sure you have all items
kind of after
in order.
Trump acknowledged that the
Details,
ceasefire breakdown
checklist,
in Doha,
including
because
still.
Hamas was
There's no sodas. There's just a cheese bread and a crazy bread. That's it.
Negotiate their ultimate survival, which is like the first point of this is actually their global acceptance of Israel's goals are the just and legitimate goals. The fact that all the hostages returned back unconditionally. Hamas is not the military or political power in the Gaza Strip. You see a lot of people from, especially the United Nations and all these leaders around the world saying ceasefire now. And that's inherently saying stop fighting, let Hamas conduct the October 7th, take hostages, cause all this suffering, and let them stay in because it's too hard to get them out of there. Then I go into, well, let's say that the negotiations are at an impasse. How does Israel go forward? And of course, the flooding of aid in there, you were right at the beginning of this to talk about there's so many nuances to the aid and the misinformation that was hitting a
good restaurant here called Doc Watson's. I've eaten there several times. They got this hot cold dip. The bomb
Foundation, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, that was giving out 1 million to 2 million meals a day.
Yeah, just like the shoes.
But what you had was the United Nations had stopped taking trucks of aid, which was happening as well, and there was a pileup of almost 1,000 trucks that were sitting idle inside Gaza, not waiting to be screened or anything, just sitting there and actually rotting and perishing all the food because the United Nations said it wasn't safe for them. They didn't want Israel exporting them. They didn't want the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation and the U.S. contractors exporting them. They just didn't want to deliver it. And again, with that inference that there's an option here just to just stop the entire war and let Hamas have their victory, because it was Hamas that was attacking this humanitarian aid, even for the people lining up to receive the free aid. Then I go into
bag anyway.
Well, let's just stop right there. So let's talk about that. I mean, the Israeli military took journalists to Gaza to show them the piles of aid that Israel had allowed in, that the United Nations was not picking up, and that they were leaving to rot. But I've covered this conflict from the beginning, and that's been a problem almost from the beginning, that the United Nations was not delivering the aid. And I asked the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation why it was, because they're on the ground, and they said, look, part of the reason is that the UN trucks get looted by Hamas. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation trucks don't get looted by Hamas because they have private security contractors guarding them. But the other thing is that some of the Hamas members are actually the truck drivers. So you have some cooperation between people delivering the aid and Hamas. The UN says that the aid is sitting there because Israel made it too hard bureaucratically for truck drivers to qualify to deliver the aid, and they imposed all these onerous conditions. But I don't know whether that's true or not. What I do know is that the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation offered, as you said, to escort the aid from the United Nations pallets to the destinations in Gaza, and they refused. If you really cared about Palestinian suffering, why would you refuse that offer? And now we have a situation where the UN is delivering the aid again. I guess they got shamed into it, but how are they doing it now? They're not using security contractors. They're not using the Israeli military. How are they doing it? Is it getting there, or is it just getting looted?
Every individual day is different, but it's absolutely being looted. And if not, only goes to the places that Hamas, because you have this separation of once you leave this basically the Israel security zone, you enter the Hamas security zone. So you have the Hamas police that intercept it and supposedly escort it to its location, and there are all these estimates of the near $1 billion, according to the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, or 500 million to Israel that Hamas has profited to the thing. But there is so much history here, even in the humanitarian aid delivery, right? Going back to even the last ceasefire when Israel allowed 25,000 trucks of aid to go in. Then they get criticized when they stop that because there's basically an overflow of aid going in. And then the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation starts. Then you have the Hamas attacking the convoys and all the lines of people getting aid and all the misinformation about Israel is just shooting people waiting in line. And that built up to this situation where then the United Nations says, well, we can't even get it into the areas. There is an active war going on here. And I think if we have a mission this far, you have to show, and I was making posts about this, how much this is not the way it's done in war. Because unlike any war in the history of war, you have currently a situation where there's one country, Egypt, that isn't letting the people out of the war, and how much suffering. There would be zero food insecurity if Egypt would open up their side of the gate and create a displaced person camp in the Sinai. And I put up a map of where the Sinai is compared to any urban area in Egypt. Create a displaced person camp, and 2 million people sounds like currently a situation where there's one country, Egypt, that isn't letting the people out of the war, and how much suffering. There would be zero food insecurity if Egypt would open up their side of the gate and create a displaced person camp in the Sinai. And I put up a map of where the Sinai is compared to any urban area in Egypt. Create a displaced person camp, and 2 million people sound the current situation in one country, Egypt, that isn't letting the people out of the war, and how much suffering. There would be zero food insecurity if Egypt would open up their side of the gate and create a displaced person camp in the Sinai. I put up a map of where the Sinai is compared to any urban area in Egypt. Create a displaced person camp, and 2 million people sound the current situation in one country, Egypt, that isn't letting the people out of the war, and how much suffering. There would be zero food insecurity.
Oh, it's gonna be fucked up. Oh, you guys can hear that. Oops.
Sites or distribution sites, and the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is expanding. So there's 4 sites. They have plans to do more. They have a program where you can come get designated people, contractors will pick up food and take it to the most vulnerable areas. But ultimately, this is a war. The IDF will continue to move forward and clear to destroy Hamas and its infrastructure, because that's the ultimate goal. Is you got to take the guns from Hamas so you can actually have peace. And
saw your gunshot behind me.
But because of this misinformation campaigns that have ebbed and flows over the last, since the beginning of the war, Israel has had to protract the war by stopping, doing things. Don't go to Rafah. If you remember that campaign, don't go here. You can't evacuate civilians. That's crazy. And again, I won't start talking.
You see the person in the Rumble chat?
This war immediately. The
Hey,
international
Holly.
community could speed this
Holy.
war by asking Egypt to create a displaced person camp just a few kilometers on the other side of the border. But without that, because every nation has self-determination, they've said no. Matter of fact, they put up a new wall, a new 18-foot wall with razor wires, and no refugees are coming this way, let alone not even past Egypt.
Fuck, I keep forgetting about this.
So Israel will continue the operation, and when you engage in the environment, then you do collect intelligence.
I don't have to deal with it. That many lights.
But it is very dangerous for the hostages. And it's very dangerous for the IDF soldiers. They're losing soldiers every day from bombs in the roads and the walls and the houses that Hamas has set traps to them as they move forward.
We're speaking to John Spencer of the Urban War Institute, and I just want to ask you then the really big question here that Israelis are asking themselves: is there any chance the hostages are coming back? Because Trump seems to think that might not happen, even as he's pressing Israel to do something about the humanitarian crisis. He's acknowledging that Hamas is
someone was in the
and maybe you just have to try to
thing. The Rumble chat talking about he saw some naked woman run through this intersection one time.
What are the prospects
that's a nice
of
boat.
hostages back, or does Israel just have to write them off and say we have to win this war?
Real nice boat.
No, so I started the article that I wrote about this. Where do we go from here? And I end with the article that war is uncertain. Nobody can predict. I do believe that you don't lose hope of getting the hostages back, either through direct military action or from changing the will of those surviving members of Hamas leadership. But you can't give up the national security of Israel, saying, it's just okay, let them, which is one of the alternatives even within the Israeli society. Like, just give them whatever they want so they give us the remaining hostages back. Now would perpetuate the violence, right? So Hamas
that's squelch.
Because
Squelch radio hits the button.
Rebuild and conduct more October 7th.
What I'm saying is it was backfeeding because I jumped into I didn't know it was still connected, and I jumped into
until you engage in that intelligence,
the chat. I didn't realize you guys were hearing me in there.
And these are the options that are at the negotiating table. We have Hamas billionaires sitting in Qatar. I don't know why they're off limits in this overall process either, but that's just the nature of the world that we're living in. So there's not one way to get the hostages back, but you can't not continue to pursue. But I don't think that anybody's written them off, because Israel, who gets to decide, of course, Israel and Israel society is a democracy. These are the goals of the war, and every time I've visited, I've interviewed the prime minister 3 times, and every echelon of chain of command. That's the number one objective, but also the other objective that Israel justly doesn't have to give up.
Do you have to write them off, though, to win the war? Because I don't know how. Okay,
I mean, you can't,
so how do you then
give up the war and surrender the war, which is the goal of Hamas? Right? If Hamas survives as a political organization, they've won the war.
So that's just unacceptable to Israel, and I guess the rest of the world and some on the left, especially in Israel, are saying maybe that's the price we have to pay to get these 20 individuals back. Maybe we have to accept that Hamas is not going to be gone. I don't know if that's a majority position in Israel, by the way, but it does seem to be what some of the leaders of the hostage movement are saying. Why are we insisting that Hamas lose? We're going to lose these 20 innocent souls if we don't just let Hamas stay. And why should we be afraid of them anyway? We defeated them. They're weak. There aren't so many of them anymore. What would you say to that argument?
Yeah, I'd say that history shows that you're just perpetuating the act of taking hostages, right? So this is the proximity that most people don't understand, that in some of these communities in southern Israel, you're 2 football fields from Hamas. That's it. You can look across the field, you see Hamas there. If Israel says, fine, Hamas's strategy of using international condemnation and using their people and causing these humanitarian crises, which are legitimate, works, then you have validated a strategy.
I have before.
Using human shields and human sacrifice and all of this. And
when I worked as a on-call firefighter, I had one of siren and light bar on my car. I think I would probably catch a charge for doing it with this.
Giving hostages back if we survive. You would perpetuate the act of hostage taking, which isn't new in Israel, right? It started, it's been going on for a very long time, and the amount of price that Israel has had to pay for a single hostage to get returned. This is like Gilad Shalit that was taken in 2008 and wasn't returned for 5 years and was exchanged for 1,000 bloodthirsty criminal prisoners, to include Yahya Sinwar himself. You would be validating the act of taking hostages.
Yeah, and that's something I don't think anyone in the world wants to do. We'll see this hostage taking again and again, including from countries that don't have Israel's defenses or readiness. And of course, they weren't ready on October 7th, but they're certainly ready now. Let me ask you if you think that Israel's new security strategy, more broadly, of attacking these threats preemptively, whether it's Iran or Lebanon, or now in southwestern Syria, where Israel has intervened to try to protect the Druze, but not just that, to keep the new regime's trucks and rocket launchers away from the Israeli border. Do you think that preemptive strategy is going to work, and can Israel sustain it over the long run?
Absolutely. I think the history of this is right. We like to talk about Gaza because of how big of a challenge that was allowed to develop, 20 years of preparation by Hamas to do this, $1 billion to spend in the underground infrastructure. But Israel's, October 7th changed everything. Iran was still the biggest threat to Israel's survival with the pursuit of a nuclear weapon. But you had a terror army, 5 times the size of Hamas on the northern border, and a vulnerable northern border. Now Israel has rewritten the Middle East map. It's defanged Hezbollah. The Lebanese government actually has a chance now. The Assad regime has fallen, and the Iranian support through Assad to Hezbollah, the ring of fire has fractured. The nuclear program set back a very long time. The strategic doctrine change, as you're talking about, Israel's had this. The Begin doctrine is this doctrine of striking at a threat before it has the opportunity to strike at you. That's kind of been there, but this proxy warfare of the Islamic regime of Iran has now been fractured, and it has no proxies left. You still have the Houthis you're launching missiles, but I think that's about to be dealt with. But also, Israel's strength has been its allies, and this has been with the United States. But you had Arab countries. You had the new Syrian interim government, or whatever you want to call it, shooting down drones during the 12-day Israel-Iran war. You had Jordan, you had others helping defend Israel. Agreements up till now, and you can't forget about the Abraham Accords, a part of this process.
I'm really in the ghetto here, so I'm gonna get out. I just paused this dash so I can get the fuck out of here.
Over the last anymore.
Let me ask you a couple more questions about the political implications of the war where it is right now. Domestically, we have a new rise of, shall we say politely, Israel skeptics on the right. And it used to be, for the last 2 decades anyway, that on the political right, there was more support for Israel than on the left. The decline on the left has continued, but now there are critics on the right who say that support for Israel is not an America First policy. What would you say to those critics? And do you think there's anything Israel can do to answer those criticisms?
I don't think he's still here. He was trying to sell his services in comments too. So he did give it a like though, so that's cool.
Absolutely political. You have this.
Stickney is actually the name of a road here in Toledo.
That is actually against what President Trump's administration says is America first. The American interests in the Middle East.
He may still be here lurking.
Israel are immense, not just in.
I get a lot of comments in Rumble, especially people trying to sell their marketing services for the channel.
So many elements, even as I'm a 25-year U.S. Army veteran. Israeli technologies have saved the lives of American soldiers. What they just did to the F-35 to improve it, and let alone the intelligence sharing that happens against ISIS and all the threats that are actually here in America through that kind of global carrier networks. One, we need to do a better job.
I'm gonna put the windows down, just get this heat smell out of here.
U.S. Israeli relationship is across the echelons, not just military, but economic, technology, geopolitical, every element of that. So there is a communication problem here, but I think even this 12th day of war, understanding that the Islamic regime in Iran's interests were first Israel and then us. I mean, what they were developing an intercontinental ballistic missile program to deliver it farther in Europe, the United States, and their pursuit of a nuclear weapon, what that would do to the world, not just to Israel. If Iran got a nuclear weapon, then who else would need one for their security? You need to have this arms race that we don't want to see, and that the United States, as the world's only superpower, is the backbone to this, which also does feed into our economic vitality and all of the things that make us a superpower. So we've got to do a better job at communicating that Israel is our greatest ally in the Middle East. And it's not just because it's a democracy and what it's doing security-wise, but for many reasons.
Do you often feel lonely? Because I often see you battling on social media out there, pushing back against people. And I know that the life of someone who takes what can be considered a pro-Israel position, even though I think you're just trying to take an objective position, but I know that that is difficult, especially if you're not, let's say, part of the Jewish community. It's hard enough to be someone in the Jewish community and speaking out in defense of Israel because there's so much criticism. But I mean, you're not supported by a community. You're just giving your opinion. It happens to line up with a pro-Israel view, and you get absolutely attacked for it. How do you deal with that?
I mean, I spent 25 years in the military. I was basically, I believe, red, white, and blue. So for me, there are aspects of, if you're saying this about Israel, what are you going to say about the United States military next time we have to fight anything? And that's really hits me hard. I have no problem.
I'm gonna switch it over to just a premium stream now.
We can't live in a world where.
So if you're not in Rumble, get over there so I can give you.
Traveling in and out of combat zones. I don't only cover Israel. I've been in Ukraine. I've been was in India and Azerbaijan. I study.
I see you over there, Eggsy.
I don't want my children being raised.
I know you already have a premium account.
It's just the voice of some person that thinks they have a nice storyline that is like an attack on my critical thinking skills. There's so many layers to why do I do what I do. I do believe there is right, wrong, good and evil, truth, lie, what's happening in this world. But